Meeting of Narberth Borough Council. It is 7:30 p.m. Ms. Bryant, could you call the roll?
Absolutely. Council President Aaron Buderek.
Here.
Council Vice President Bob Weisford.
Here.
Councilmember Fred Bush.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Fortner.
Here.
Councilmember Rob McGreevy.
Here.
Councilmember Michelle Panopoulos.
Here.
Councilmember Cindy Rickards.
Here.
Mayor Andrea Deutsch.
Here.
All right, thank you. And Mayor Deutsch, could you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Manager, can you help me with the agenda additions?
Absolutely. So this is an opportunity. This is a new thing we've added to the agenda. Per recent state law changes, the Sunshine Act now requires us, if we're going to make any changes to the agenda, council has to vote on that at the meeting. So this is an opportunity, if there's any last minute things that come to my attention or council's attention, to bring up. Thankfully, I have no requested additions to the agenda, Council President.
All right. Council members, is there anything that has come up at the last minute to add to this agenda? Hearing none, we will move to my comments, of which I have none. Ms. Mayor?
Yes, thank you. We are coming up on holiday season. Thanksgiving is next week. I want to wish everybody here and in the borough a very happy Thanksgiving. During this holiday season, I ask that folks support our downtown businesses by shopping local and helping our businesses have a healthy holiday season. We are going into the holidays, just want to remind folks to be careful about drinking and driving. I know next Wednesday, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, is a heavy drinking day. You know, with Uber and designated drivers, there's ways to get home safely and make sure everybody else gets home safely on the road. So please be mindful of that and don't drink and drive during the holiday season. Let's get through a season safe. Next, we have annual Dickens Fest has a return this year on December 5th, Sunday, December 5th, and that's going to be a very exciting time. We're super excited to have that back, so come on back and join your friends and neighbors in celebrating 1940s London on December 5th. And finally, I have the police report that was submitted by Chief Gallagher. Things are looking very solid and safe in the borough. I would like to thank our officers for having an initiative, a safe driving initiative in October, where they stopped the number of vehicles for going too fast and issued a number of tickets. And we're going to have these initiatives regularly in the borough. So I'm submitting the report as part of the packet, and that's it.
All right, thank you so much. We'll now move to public comment. Is there anyone present in the room who would like to make public comment? Ms. Lasher, just state your name and address for the record.
Lori Lasher, 31 Price. In addition to supporting our local businesses during this holiday season, I'd also like to remind everyone of the food bank. I think we all remember that at times of Thanksgiving, when we're all enjoying our nice meals, we're, sometimes some of our neighbors are not, especially the elderly, and sometimes you'd be surprised that there are a lot of people with food insecurity right here in our own borough. And so if you could remember, please, to keep the food bank in your thoughts, as well as when you're shopping, or even just send them a donation. It's pretty easy from their page. So the other thing I would just like to ask is the budget. You're printing it like way too small. When I print it out, I can't read it. I can read like the first 3 or 4 pages, but the last like 5 or 6 cannot be read. And it's not, we might kill another tree or two when I print it out, but I think anybody who wants to look at it really needs to be able to do that. So if you could print it out yourself and see if you and your eyes can read it, and if you can, then fine. But I would ask any of you to try to read some of those last few pages. So I would appreciate that. And also, will there be and I know nobody has to answer anything, but will there be a time to go over questions on the budget in detail? Since I can't ask that question later, I thought I would ask it now.
Hold that thought. And, oh,
Thank you.
been noted. Thank you. Is there anyone from the Zoom audience who would like to make a public comment?
Yes, please.
Okay, I think that's Anne Marie.
Yes, that is. Hello, council. I would like to ask this council again to seriously consider putting open space protection on our parks. With all this development that is going on and the increase in population, the parks are becoming more and more important to everybody in this town. A way to secure parks forever is through open space protection. I'd also like to ask a question about the 200 block of Sabine Avenue with the playground and with the residents there. We've been asking for increased signage about the one-way signs since the signs that were there, as you all know, I've been telling you for the past 7-8 years, have been taken down. What's going on with that? Do we have signs coming up? There was supposed to be traffic studies and we haven't heard anything.
All right, noted. I will let the mayor and police chief get back to you.
Great. And then I have one more thing. There was a very interesting article in the Mainline Times today about firefighter tax credits. The Narberth gives a current tax credit to firefighters, but Lower Merion, it looks as if it's going to be following Haverford Township in giving its firefighters a 100% property tax relief. The purpose of that is because, as we all know, there's a nationwide problem with retaining and recruiting volunteer firefighters. By having volunteer firefighters, it saves boroughs and townships thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in salaries, benefits, and what you have for normally full-time employees. So this tax credit is a way to retain as well as recruit other members for our fire department and our emergency medical services. I will forward that article to each of your inboxes for you to read. It's a very interesting article. The township is also looking to expand that article or that tax credit to include school taxes, to reduce the burden of school taxes from first responders. So it's a very interesting article that I would encourage each of you to read and look into adopting for Narberth.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else on Zoom who would like to make a public comment? I get a thumbs up from Michelle that they're, or from you.
Yeah, same here.
That's it.
That is it.
Okay, we will close public comment, move to agenda item 7, which is our consent agenda. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of October 6th and October 20th, meetings of Borough Council.
What's the whole consent agenda?
Oh, I'm sorry. I move to approve the consent agenda items for approval listed 7A through H.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Second, any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Consent agenda is approved. That was unanimous, right? Thank you. We'll move to 8A, public health and safety. Oh. Moving fast.
I was on one.
We'll go to 8B,
Back to
and
your agenda.
then we'll come back to 8A.
I move that we consider the proposals from PFM for debt insurance for facility repairs.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, any discussion? Oh, thank you. Ms. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. President. So just a quick recap again for Borough Council and the public. We talked about this at some of our budget discussions at prior meeting work sessions. The Finance and Administration Committee has also talked about this. Basically what the borough will be doing is refinancing its existing debt in order to lock in a fixed rate, because most of pretty much all of our loans are variable rate loans, and you never know what the future will hold with interest rates. So try to lock in a lower fixed rate than what we currently have in order to save the taxpayers money now and in the future. And then in addition to that, as part of the 2022 budget, I've asked council to consider borrowing $1 million to pay for facility repairs at 100 Conway and 80 Windsor. This will be done through a competitive bid process, and what you would be approving tonight is moving forward with the consultant, public financial management, as well as the bond counsel that they and I have identified, Eastburn and Gray, whose proposal was added to your packet earlier today. In reviewing the fees from Eastburn and Gray compared to past borough bond counsel, it seems very reasonable fee. And I would say based on my past experience with PFM, that their rates are fair and that the money we'll pay them will help us save money on the bid process for loans.
Questions on that? Mr. Bush?
So I have the interest rates right now have been historically low for the last year and a half or so. So this is a good opportunity, while that remains the case, to lock in savings for the borough.
Okay. Okay. All in favor of adopting 8B? Aye. Motion is adopted. We'll go back to 8A.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I move that Borough Council approve advertisement of the ordinance for snow emergency routes.
Seconded. And discussion?
Thank you, Mr. President. So for all of council and the public to understand what we're talking about here tonight, it was recently brought to my attention that the signage the borough currently has for the location of emergency snow routes does not match up with our ordinance. The ordinance was horribly outdated and only listed 4 blocks in the borough as being a snow emergency route. So this ordinance would, for the most part, make where we have signage match the ordinance. In addition, there are some cul-de-sacs that it does add. The list was basically devised based upon consultation with the Borough Public Works Department, as well as with our first responders. And just so again, everyone knows, the purpose of the snow emergency route is so that when it snows, there's adequate space on the road for plowing so that our first responders can handle emergency situations. So streets that are a little bit wider in the borough may not be included on this list, whereas streets that are narrower are the ones that tend to have the parking restricted during snow emergencies.
Any other questions? All right.
Just,
Yes.
during
Mayor.
snow emergencies, if people don't have a parking space or live along the routes, where are some places that they can move their vehicle, temporarily if there's going to be a snowstorm? Can they move to the borough lots? Or?
I believe historically that has been what's been done.
Okay.
And especially the 201 Sabine lot.
Okay, just giving people an option.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Thank you. 8C. Who would like
I
to
think that's me.
put this on the table? Okay.
All right,
Fred.
I move that Borough Council approve the tolling agreement for 3 Elmwood Avenue.
Okay, Solicitor Walco, can we get some background?
Yes, as council remembers, at the September meeting, Borough Council voted to deny the preliminary plan presented for the 3 Elmwood property. As often is the case when a plan is denied, the property owners or the equitable owner, the applicants, has asserted claims on appeal as a result of that denial of the plan. It's believed that there could still be issues that could be worked out amicably between the borough and the applicant. So instead of having them file appeals, them paying their attorneys, you paying your attorneys to defend that and do any counter appeals, this is an agreement that says, give us some time let's talk about this, see if we can come to an amicable use of this property regarding this application, to the extent that the borough is able to do that. And if things aren't working out, then they will still be able to file their claims. And really the tolling is the tolling, they're proposing to toll the appeal period after that denial. So in my opinion, not having all that litigation going on in the background is cheaper and it's easier for the borough. and the parties, and we're not giving up anything by having this extra time if there is a chance that this could be amicably resolved. And that's what this agreement does.
Thank you. Any questions, council members?
You need a second for that?
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Barbara.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye. All in agreement is approved. Can I get a motion for D?
Yeah, I move that council approve advertisement of the 2022 budget.
I'll second that.
Seconded. Any discussion or information?
So I guess to real brief recap for council, and then I defer to you, Council President Budrick, about any public comment or questions on it. We've talked about the last few budget in our last few work sessions. This budget is not substantially different than the budget that you saw at your last work session. I also do want to apologize for the PDF format of this budget. I do promise you the version that gets posted to the website and the version that you'll have in your packet for final approval will be in a much more readable format. So my apologies to council and the public on that. I'm happy to take any specific comments or questions. I mean, just to recap really quick, I think this budget does a great job advancing the goals of our comprehensive plan, as well as helping ensure the borough has a stable fund balance going forward. And I'm really, really glad for where it's at. And otherwise, I'm happy to take any comments or questions on it.
I'll go around. Michelle has a thought. No? Cindy?
I was going to report this out in F&A, but I suppose we could do it now.
Go for it.
You're going to see the comprehensive plan evaluation that F&A did, but what we just discussed in our meeting was really that in moving forward for next year's budget, that we move up that process of the comprehensive plan review substantially more, maybe in the summer to really inform the budget. So look for a process recommendation.
I think that was probably the original goal, right? And then we got into the pandemic and new manager. And,
of course.
So that sounds, I'm glad that sounds like it's getting back on track. Okay. Other comments? Mr. Bush?
Just to make sure for the public that this will be available for them to look at before council makes its final.
Absolutely, and the borough is legally required to do that.
Okay, so it's going to be up on the borough website.
Absolutely, it'll be available on the borough website, and legally it has to be available for inspection at the borough office. And we are also required to post a legal ad in the newspaper for it.
I think most people will be looking at it online.
Yeah.
So that's where our main focus should be. Okay, great.
Okay. Well, hearing no other questions, all in favor of advertising the 2022 budget? Aye. All right, 8E.
Let's make it.
Dining.
Move that Borough Council approve advertisement of the outdoor dining ordinance.
Second.
Second.
Michelle's got it. Discussion? There was some discussion at the last meeting, maybe an update on where we stand?
Do you want to give, so we've been discussing this in, so first of all, there are going to be a couple amendments that we're going to propose because there's a clarification to be made. But, our current setup for outdoor dining was temporary and has expired. So we were looking to set up a more permanent guidance for applying for a permit for outdoor dining. We did a survey, staff did the survey. It's extremely popular the way it is now. So this ordinance basically keeps sort of the status quo in place in general for how businesses can use the outdoor areas. They provide a lot more legal guidance for what happens. You have to make sure to clean up your trash. You have to provide trash receptacles. You have to. So it's sort of more structured for the rules of how it's going to go. But if you're looking at the downtown, it's going to resemble what's there right now. And it also covers what to do if the borough needs these fixtures removed. If we need to do the do work for snow removal, if we need to remove it for a public event or something, or repairs, what the rules are going to be for that. So the change that needs to be made, I would propose an amendment that, let me find it.
You can discuss it if you like, Fred.
Yeah, please, thank you.
So there are three, from what was drafted and presented to council in the packet, there were three small changes that are intertwined that I believe, and after discussion, Mr. Bush need to be addressed. And really, it's because the ordinance was drafted to address right-of-way areas, which is what we think of sidewalks along the roadways, and then it was thought to address private parking areas as parking spaces, private parking lots. But what it did not address very clearly was municipal parking lots and municipal parking spaces that are not on the street. And in order to make it clear where that would be considered, that it is a parking area, but it's a public owned with the right-of-way, a change would, define a public parking space or a parking lot as a right-of-way, so it would fall under the right-of-way section. The second change related to that, which council does need to provide some feedback on, is right now the ordinance says that if you're a dining establishment, you can take on 2 on-street parking spaces. On-street, again, it means on-street. I believe that there is a need to also put a then maximum number of parking spaces within a municipal lot in order to, again, provide some guidance as to, those are the borough spaces. We don't have to provide them with anything, but it's good to have uniformity as to this is the most amount of spaces we're willing to give up. So it would provide that. Again, I think there needs to be some discussion as to what that number should be. And then the third amendment, which is unrelated, is right now it says that if there is a snow emergency, that you have to remove out of the right-of-way. After discussion, and Mr. Bush can maybe give some more details, it seems that the business community is willing to take some more ownership over that. And again, the concern is with public works as to, we need to be able to plow our streets and our sidewalks more appropriately. But sometimes they don't plow, and a snow emergency is declared. What this amendment would do would provide some leeway to say you have to clear out unless you're otherwise approved by the borough to allow for it to remain. So that's something that can be done through the permit process ahead of time. Just kind of gives the ability to say, oh well, there's a snow emergency. I have to take all of these establishments down, these improvements down. Well, not necessarily. It's only if the borough wants you to do that. So those are the three amendments from what was drafted that are proposed. And again, the item for discussion would be the maximum amount of spots that borough would want to provide within a municipal law.
Questions, Bob?
So I have a thought about how to structure the municipal lot offering versus the right-of-way on-street offering. And it's consistent, I think, with what we discussed during the pandemic with the emergency arrangements, where basically, I guess, on the south side of the street, it's McShay's and Get Cafe would be the two businesses that have, or that have tables, that could have tables, and maybe philosophy. But under this ordinance, in the way that's written out, McShay's could have 2 on-street parking spaces on the front. But I think we thought about that it might be, that it was too much of a burden because the sidewalk's so narrow on McShay's side and the Get side, that we offered them sort of extra space in the municipal lot in lieu of just the few spaces in the front. It was kind of a sweetener to say, like, if you use the back lot, which really could work for you, you can have more space back there. And I think there is some logic to think that the on-street spaces have more value because they're where everybody wants to park versus the municipal lots that are not as valuable. And I think we want to incentivize McShay's and Get, if they do want on-site space, to use that lot, the municipal lot. So I would think it might be equitable to say you can have either or. You could either have 2 on-street spots, or you could have, say, 3 municipal spots for each one on-street spot. So then, and that would be consistent, I think, also with what we offered McShay's, which was six spots in municipal lot. So they could sort of have either 2 on-street spots in the front, or 6 municipal spots in the back. So it's an either-or option. And that way you don't, I think it may sort of resolve the concern about the inequity of the space, but also there was a reason that we did that, which had to do with being fair to everyone who might need those spaces in the right of way.
And can I ask a pre-question to this? Because I think before we talk about space and equity, we should think about, now that we're moving from almost an emergency, right? How do we help support business open, to a really more thought out, how are we redefining the streetscape of our town in a semi-permanent? I think the question now shifts to, when you are walking, biking, driving down Haverford Avenue, would you prefer to see al fresco dining and parking in the back municipal parking lot? Or would you rather see cars parked on Haverford and al fresco dining in a municipal lot? So the conversation has actually shifted in my mind, because the community has very clearly said, we love this streetscape, we love al fresco dining. I would suggest that we actually now incentivize folks to utilize Haverford Avenue as that kind of open air walking facility, and let's put the cars back to the municipal lot, and really see this as legislating a social infrastructure of our town that really speaks to kind of what the comprehensive plan has called to, what businesses, and more recently what the community has said, we love the outdoor streetscape. So I would start with that kind of shift in thinking, and then revisit the equity or equality of spots.
So my opinion is that the status quo is working pretty well, that we haven't, I think the businesses have utilized their spaces well. I think they've gotten good business out of it, that it's doing its job, it's keeping them alive. So I would be hesitant to remove something that's already there. The current allocation is 8 spaces for McShay's, so we could say 6. That would be a reduction from what they already have, a slight change to the status quo. But to me, this is working well, and I'd like to see it continue.
We could allow 4 per one. I mean,
Yeah, 4 per spot.
4 per spot, so that they could have continues what they have.
So you want to support more cars on Haverford Avenue? Again, I think back to mine is more the philosophy of, are we trying to increase social infrastructure, given that this is a semi-permanent, and talking about replacing those plastic barriers to something more aesthetically pleasing, because this is really going to become part of our town's fabric.
I don't think this is permanent. I think this is a 1 year. Right now, these permits are for a year, so we could revisit this.
I think that's right. And also, I think this is, I support the idea of letting the businesses decide for themselves which works better, given their own configuration and their needs. Let them trade off. I think that's a reasonable solution, and but you do have to trade off. You can't have that.
Yeah.
Can't double dip.
I agree.
Okay. Claire?
I have a little bit different perspective as a business owner downtown, and while for some people the current situation is working out, and other people do not feel the same necessarily, including some business owners who are reticent to come public for fear of, not getting along with their neighbors. There are multiple business owners who feel the inequity of what is going on currently downtown. That there's a business on the south side of the street that has significantly more spaces than any other business in our downtown, including multiple other dining establishments. The back parking lot is currently basically the exclusive use of one business to the detriment of every other business on the south side. So I think searching for a little bit of equity in the current situation would be in the borough's best interest.
So this legislation does remove some uses that are currently out there. You can't cook outside. You can't have major operations outside. I mean, you can let people wait outside, but.
Does that mean that the back parking lot is basically being used by one entity, which it's a public entity and it's not, it was never meant to be used like that. We did an emergency situation, but there is an inequity that's going on right now.
Also, I think what you see on the ground doesn't necessarily represent what the borough has offered. I know
That's
that there
right.
have been multiple instances where there's been some aggressive creep
Yeah.
and then, asks to push it back. And I think this codifies things in a way that will make it even easier.
There's a lot of asking forgiveness rather than permission.
Right.
And I have been I've been approached by the
Yeah.
multiple entities who have.
But I think this will make it easier on a daily basis to, everyone can agree on the size of the box. And it won't be up for question, or so-and-so said, or et cetera, et cetera. Bob, and then.
I just wanted to ask Cindy for clarification of your idea. Basically, if I heard you correctly, the way the ordinance is currently written would satisfy your desire that all of the businesses use the right-of-way side, and that the back parking lot be left entirely for vehicles to park. That's a parking space. And that would then it would be, I think, the question is, would that achieve the kind of equity that the mayor's pointing to?
I do, and so two separate issues. Yes, absolutely. So I think if we're going to say you get 6 spots in the back parking lot, then we ought to be sure we're prepared for all 3 of those businesses that would qualify to each take 6 spots, and we lose that parking lot altogether. I do think that we should now be equal. I do hope that this extends beyond a year. I understand this ordinance is for a year. However, backing up, though, I think much like, in the form-based zoning, you moved where like a garage could be, where parking your car very intentionally, to say we are a community that doesn't want to highlight automobiles, but we want to highlight kind of a social community feel. I think that we could reflect that here by saying, no, we actually want to encourage Haverford Ave to be more pedestrian and move those cars in a parking lot. And I say that because that's something that we've all talked about as council, but it was so clearly reported out by our community who said, we love this. We would love Haverford Avenue to be more pedestrian and more walkable, and this is an opportunity to do that. So I would start there. If the answer is no, we don't want to do that, then I would add to, okay, how do we equitably allocate those spots now that it is more than a crisis?
And keep in mind, it's not just one entity. There are at least 3 entities who equitably would have the option of doing the exact same thing if in the back parking lot. And how does that play out for everybody else who relies on that lot?
I mean, my suspicion is that they already are using the front area, and I suspect they'll continue to use the front area. They could have requested to use the back lot, and they have not yet.
And I think the configuration of their spaces is the reason.
So if you don't mind, I would propose that we put a number of 6 spaces, which is lower than what we currently allow. I think it is preferable to use the back space when appropriate. I think having a whole stretch along the sidewalk on Haverford, as Bob pointed out, is crowded. And I remember when the ice cream place it was almost impossible to wait in line because of the
Well, that's
businesses
because
on the
it
front.
wasn't in the parking spot, it was on the sidewalk.
So this would be a reduction, right? This is a reduction of what we're allowing. It, kind of indicates council's concern with this, and we can revisit it next year,
Yeah.
if we continue to feel that there's a problem.
I would support Andrea in saying I think you're putting businesses in an awkward position, and I'm not sure how I could justify if the business said to me, wait, why do I only get 2 spots, but another business gets 6 plus? I don't know that I could answer that.
Well, not 6 plus, I'm talking about 6.
Okay, 6. It doesn't matter, 6.
I just make sure we're all talking about the same thing here.
Yeah.
And
Bob.
I kind of made my pitch for this sort of either-or solution, and as I've listened, and I'm still kind of in that camp, but as I've listened to the mayor's concern, and as I listen to your kind of notion of a kind of this social infrastructure idea, it's very appealing. the thing that was blocking me was the idea that the emergency management group had, that there was just like not enough, like the sidewalk on the south side just isn't wide enough to accommodate like tables and parklets and the whole thing. So if those businesses on the south side, if we were to say like, okay, you can use 2 in the front, or let's say we were not to offer the municipal lot, I think we'd have to do a lot of work to really put in place the conditions under which those parklets could be used on the south side. Like they couldn't have any, they really practically couldn't have anything also on the sidewalk. And currently some of those businesses do have some stuff on the sidewalk. And partly because it was impossible to wait in line for an ice cream when the tables were on the street. I mean, there's just not enough space for everything that's going on there. And so that's kind of why I think, like, I agree with Fred, like the status quo kind of works. If we want to create something new, it's going to take a lot more, it's going to take a bit more thought and I think engineering to make it work.
Bob, what would you think instead of 3 to 1, 2 to 1? Instead, you proposed a 3 to 1 trade-off for the back spots instead of front, and I'm counter-proposing. What do you think about a 2 to 1?
You know, and I was just using numbers. Like I was kind of pointing towards the status quo rather than, you know, I was supporting the idea of the status quo, but in either or, the businesses would have to choose either or.
I feel that status quo is currently inequitable.
Yeah, no, I heard you. Yeah.
I mean, just functionally, I'll say that, you know, I did some counting, and 3 to 1, I think, lets McShay's use their big tent, and 2 to 1 would not, so.
Their big tent shouldn't be the overriding decision on this. That shouldn't be a...
As I said, I think the status quo, you know, I'm looking at it from the status quo, and I think that is the status quo, that they have a big tent out there. They're, you know, if we're saying they can't use the tent, they're you know, and everybody else can keep doing what they're doing, you know, it's the same problem.
I think a private purchase by a business should not dictate the municipal use of municipal lands.
Could we continue with the status quo and then continue the conversation about how this, you know, because eventually the backlot's maybe not going to continue to be available.
No.
So we may need to move towards what you're proposing anyway, Cindy, but maybe we just need a little more time to kind of work it out. And since we need this ordinance now, like.
I would suggest this is the opportunity for us to move forward. I mean, keep in mind with the ice cream store, the reason why the line extended in McShay's because that was at the time of the pandemic where you were 6 feet apart. Mm-hmm. So Village Streets mapped out 6 feet, so you were down the line. I think this is an opportunity to really kind of incorporate what the Narberth Cycling Club has come, that the citizens have come, that we move forward to that. I'm not sure when you say status quo is working for everyone, I'm not sure that's accurate. And I agree with Andrea that I don't think that we can legislate because of a private business's purchase, that we have to take the whole community in hand.
Okay.
I mean, I think that
Michelle, yeah.
I'll just make one last comment. I think that what I would say, in answer to a business owner that said, how come they can get 6 in the back and I'm on the north side and I can, is because you're on the north side, you don't have a municipal lot behind your building. I would also say, given the choice between putting some alfresco dining in the street where people will walk past on the sidewalk and see it in a nice environment, planting some trees, and putting it in a parking lot where there's garbage, I think most businesses are going to choose the street, and I think it's the rare business model and just particular, you know, that will sort of find that to be a favorable arrangement. And given the business the way things are, I'm willing to let the businesses figure it out for themselves. They do. I agree they have to choose. I don't know if the ratio should be 1 to 4, 1 to 3. I mean, it's hard for me to say what's the value of a streetscape facing parking spot for alfresco dining versus one in the kind of not very pleasant to be in parking lot in the back. I felt like 1 to 3 seems reasonable. It's less than the current use, but it's still probably manageable. It sort of keeps the creep in place. Can't creep outside your tent. That's it. I'm comfortable with that. So.
Rob?
I'm just wondering if, say we were to move forward with this as proposed, could we, I'm asking Barbara as chair of our parking committee, is this something like Cindy's proposal Is that something we could consider in our committee in terms of the downtown parking
I suppose
policies?
we could. Excuse me, I suppose we could. I'm not even there yet. I wasn't on council when you created the temporary regulations that allowed this in there. Why did we allow, did we have a limit on how many parking spaces in the municipal lot, or did we just say, do whatever you want? Okay.
No, we didn't say do whatever you want.
I
There were
thought
individual,
so, but I was
there were
just,
individual permits that
Oh,
were,
okay.
that were issued for each
okay. And
business.
so you had one business owner come and say, I want 6 spaces. Okay.
I don't know that I don't know what the exact ask was, but I know that whatever the exact ask, it is in no way looked like what it looks like now.
Okay.
Yes, there's a creep.
So, yeah, okay.
Yes.
I guess, you know, I wasn't here in the past, I just started working here ever since it has been a backlog. I guess I would say, I mean, obviously whatever council wants to do, we as a staff, we will make it happen for you. From an enforcement standpoint, I think the opportunity for the temptation for bad behavior is probably higher in the back lot versus being out front. And I will admit just from that reason, you know, I think both sides are making a lot of good points here tonight, but I will just admit from purely just an enforcement standpoint, on that one alone, I think being in the street would be better than being in the back lot. But of course, if you all want in the back lot, we will enforce the rules and do what we need to do.
So,
So more fun.
I'll offer my opinion, a couple thoughts, just throw them out there, and then we can, you know. One, I find it interesting that we have made so much of our public parking space available for dining, and we are not hearing from the community incredible pressure about the lack of parking. It's just interesting, and I think it should be thought about whether we can be more liberal, right? You know, where's that line, right? And I know that it affects different businesses differently, but it's sort of, I'm making it as a call for conversation, you know. The second is, you know, personally, I favor the status quo for now. I think we're still in a changing environment. We don't know where this pandemic is going. We have businesses that they are small businesses and they have made investments in these spaces. And, you know, as a small business person myself, some reasonable amount of time to pay off those investments before sort of major change. And I also think, so I would support the status quo or a 3-to-1 ratio, and any active engagement with the business association to sort of come to a new, if there's going to be a new normal, rather than us sort of tonight at this council meeting advertising an ordinance with a major change that's going to come down like a, you know, like a ton of bricks as a surprise. I don't know that we want to do that.
And also, as I read the ordinance, as I went, it's my understanding that violation of approved spaces can result in revocation of all the spots. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, so if there is creep beyond what it has been permitted by the ordinance, that can come back and end up
Absolutely.
with nothing.
Borough can enforce that. All right,
Okay.
last word, Cindy?
Well, just to your point of saying, well, businesses have made investment, and all businesses have made investment, we have discussed, and Samantha, I'm looking at you, it's saying replacing those kind of plastic, what we thought would be temporary few months, into the borough, cost sharing or providing some really pretty streetscape, so the business would not be reinvesting. And again, Samantha, I really hear, we have had a huge compliance issue. And I don't want to continue to put another year of enforcement on who? The police, the code enforcement?
Both.
Both? And think that we have a missed opportunity to invest in our streets for this work.
So what is the ordinance on the table? We have the ordinance. I think the only factor that was in flux in this conversation, I mean, that I'm hearing sort of support for would be adjusting the ratio.
There are 2 other technical amendments, but I don't think anybody has raised any objections to it. That would, because we need to set a definition for what happens with the municipal parking lot, which is not in there.
Okay.
So what's under debate is how many spaces should be allowed in the municipal parking lot.
Okay.
Which is not in the ordinance right now.
Okay.
So there's none now.
Right. So right now, I think we want to we want a friendly amendment or the
Yeah,
mover to make an amendment?
I'm going to suggest that it be, that the number of spaces allowed be 6, and that if you, that does not, that is, you can't have that and the spaces in front, right? It's either 6 in back or 2 in front.
John, does that? is
Yeah,
that
1 to 3
described in the way
ratio.
that's-
Or 1 in front, 3 in back.
Okay, ours supposed to be 1 and 3, a 1 to 3 ratio.
So it's two separate things. It's either, can you have both as a 1 to 3 ratio, or is it either or in
It's
the
either
front or
or.
in the back?
It's either or.
I think it's simpler if it's either or. Let's just say it's either or.
And Samantha?
If I may request either an actual vote or roll call vote on that, because I've heard a lot of different opinions. and
yeah.
For sure,
Okay.
for sure.
On that particular amendment.
Yes.
I have a question or maybe a
Go ahead, ask your question.
suggestion. I'm just looking to see, like, is there, Fred was referring to this as temporary, is there a fuse on this, an expiration date?
The permits last for a year.
Oh, the permits last for a year.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to ask if we could discuss if that's the appropriate amount of time. Like maybe we need to have a shorter,
Like 6
like
months?
maybe we need to pull it up to 6 months so that we're really looking at this again and we could, refuse to reissue a permit. It could just be a renewal date, but we could refuse to reissue if there's sort of a certain number of violations, it expires. And then that sort of that takes care of, trying to, I think that just makes it cleaner to enforce. If there's
I'm seeing some nods.
and then we could also, in the meantime, Cindy, continue to, revisit, or everyone continue to revisit
Yeah.
Cindy's idea.
I think that's a great idea.
Knowing that we're gonna have to,
I would can we also discuss Andrea's 2-to-1 ratio, or is everyone
Well,
squarely?
let's do it this way. I have an
Okay.
idea, okay. Just
I'm
one
fitting
second.
enforcement. I know.
All
John,
right.
where's the enforcement on
So we
that?
can,
It's either,
Same.
oh, go ahead.
6 more permit?
It's a police or
Here we go.
track or code enforcement,
Okay.
or the
So,
fire department.
Fred, can I ask, well, you didn't you didn't formally move to make it 3-1, or you did, but.
I believe I did, but I can.
Okay, withdraw
I'll
that for
it.
me, just
Sure.
procedurally. All right, Cindy, would you like to make a motion for it to be 2-1?
I move that we do a 2-to-1 ratio, front street parking to right-of-way municipal lot.
Okay, is there a second on that motion?
I think, don't we want to flip the wording? One on street, 2 in the back?
Right, did I
One.
say that?
Is that what I'm saying?
What, right-of-way being back.
Okay.
Is there a second on that motion? Right, hearing none.
Okay.
So now, Fred, would you like to make a motion?
I move that we incorporate a 3-to-1 ratio of back to front.
Okay, is there a second on that?
Second.
Seconded. Okay, all in favor of amending the consideration of advertisement of the ordinance for outside dining to include a 3-to-1 back to front ratio? Aye. 6 in favor, 1 opposed. All right. Can I get a motion about changing, an amendment to change the time length of the permit?
so I move that we amend the ordinance to provide for a 6-month permitting period
Instead of,
instead of a 12-month permit.
is there a second for that?
Second.
Seconded, Mr. McGreevy, and all in favor of that? Aye. That is unanimous. Okay, now we can vote on this ordinance and we all know what we're voting on. All in favor of consideration of advertisement of the ordinance for outside dining as amended?
Which includes the snow language amendments regarding giving the borough additional leeway and the definitions for the right-of-way and parking areas to include the municipal ones.
Yes. All in favor? Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you. We conclude our action items. We move, monthly reports have been filed under 9A, committee updates. To you, Councilor Rickards.
Sure. Ms. Bryant, are you going to pop up that comp plan? Do you have that handy? The PDF? No, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I can pull that.
So I'll just go over, we just briefly met. We discussed the increase of the NBA allowance, and just for kind of a note of history for the public that we traditionally give. Last year we gave $12,000 to the Narberth Business Association. That amount has doubled to $25,000, largely because when the 4th of July committee retired, they did have substantial funds in their account that would have been used for the fireworks this year. Those funds were not donated or passed on to the current 4th of July celebration. So therefore, the NBA acquired the event of the fire with no base. And we felt that it was appropriate to then subsidize some of that so we could in fact have fireworks this year. FNA did recommend that with that substantial financial commitment from taxpayers' money, that we do look at how those funds could be earmarked and reported upon. The committee did not feel like that was something that we had to do, rather than something that the office of the NBA could collectively work on and then report back the structure to us all.
One thing that I think, tell me if I'm overstating, I think the fireworks group that's operating under the NBA for this coming season is excited about their new fundraising opportunities. We're sort of staking them from a cash perspective, not necessarily spending all this money.
Oh, correct.
Right? We're giving them cash to be able to sign a contract.
Absolutely.
For goods and materials.
Absolutely. And
so there's an expectation that at least some significant percentage of those funds will be able to carry forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
So, and stay tuned.
Not an annual commitment.
Yeah, that's right.
No, but stay tuned for 4th of July.
Also,
fundraising.
if I may just point out that it's not just the 4th of July committee oversaw a number of events.
Correct.
Not just one particular, not just the 4th of July.
Right.
So it would, now that the Business Association has taken over all these events.
Oh, it's absolutely more.
It's
Yes.
that much more important.
But someone had to write a check for a deposit for fireworks.
Yeah.
Additionally, and I guess why we're onto this, I think it's important to note as well, there are many nonprofit organizations in Narberth, and we give in-kind donations through Public Works, additional police and overtime that we don't really always state or isn't obvious. The 4th of July committee was the only committee that actually also had access to borough space. So for years, Ed Ridgway has been asking to store barrels, let's say, or the carts, and we always said no. The only group that was afforded borough space was that 4th of July committee. So we need to really think about too, is like how do we equitably distribute both in-kind donations and physical space. And all that will kind of go in that earmarked budget to the NBA as well, as we think about that.
Do we know what happened to the sort of 5 figures of money that the 4th of July committee had when they disbanded?
No, Aaron, I actually had asked when they retired if the 4th of July committee would transfer that money into the NBA for a fireworks fund, and was told that the organization actually had to give it legally to an organization that was dedicated to children and did not feel as if the NBA qualified. I did, for all of you, also just want to note, I did ask for the banners and the games and the tables and the heads to be appraised, and for the borough to have an opportunity to purchase those. And unfortunately, those banners and games and tables were sold or donated somewhere else, so I can't report to you all where those are at this time.
Okay, thank you for that.
But moving on from the
Continue,
NBA, again, FNA was very confident that the office and the NBA would work this out and report back to council. We've been talking about the comprehensive review plan, which you see up here. We all reviewed the comprehensive plan. We did it on a Likert scale to say this is in progress, this has been achieved. Fred actually compiled that data and said, okay, let's take those comprehensive plan initiatives that were high priority and that we as a council ranked as low progress. And then we worked through that, and you can't see that clearly here on this view, but we worked through, just like the first third of the really high priority, and we analyzed that data. And what we did was, we can talk about this in the workshop session, is we identified like what are the considerations, what are the needs, and what council committee or office should be working on that. You all have that in the packet. That's going to be posted online for the public to see as well. And FNA, as I mentioned during the budget review, is going to recommend that we do this sooner next year because there really are some budget implications and it can help inform us in that budget process. We will, not that this completely answers the public comment about the budget process, but we do want to begin kind of a town hall where we can kind of report back to the public. Aaron, you had traditionally kind of done a President's State of the Union. FNA is recommending that the manager kind of lead a review of this town hall and that potentially ask committees to come and kind of fill in the blanks and give an updates where we have identified in the comp plan.
All right,
So that's F&A.
thank you. Infrastructure.
Infrastructure will meet next week.
Public health and safety.
We reported last time, so I think we met the first week.
Okay. And parking ad hoc, Council Ford.
Sure. We met on November 9th. Our next meeting is November 23rd at 8 a.m. Tuesday. We're working towards having something for council to consider at hopefully the first December meeting, but.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments for the good of council? Yes, Mr. Bush.
So COVID rates locally, once again, are going up. Just a reminder that many people right now are eligible for booster shots. So if you are, please get your booster. Children aged 5 to 11 are now able to go and get vaccinated. Please take your kids, get them vaccinated. It's really our best defense. And we need to keep vigilant. Even though it seems like it all should be over, it's not yet over.
Any other comments for the good of council?
I just have a comment that council for the public's knowledge, and it was on the consent agenda as well, and I will let Manager Bryan discuss working out the right-of-way easements with Amtrak to move that bridge project forward. That was a major hurdle that was stalled for a long time until the manager came in and really got that moving forward. So having these approved by both parties and negotiated successfully for the borough is a huge step. Another step that's been holding over the bridge project was the need to acquire certain right-of-ways to make that project feasible. Last week, pursuant to the ordinance that council previously authorized, we have filed a declaration of taking for the right-of-way areas for a fee simple possession on the corner of 198 Elmwood for a grading easement for that bridge, and a temporary construction easement for that bridge. So we have moved forward with that taking of that property, not the entire property, just as portions of the right-of-way necessary for this bridge project. We are still hoping to work amicably with the property owner in order to resolve the compensation for those amounts. But at this point in time, we've moved forward in order to allow that project to progress because we don't have to wait for that matter to be resolved until we actually take possession. So those are two major hurdles that we've advanced recently. I'm not sure if you have anything else to say about the easement.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak on it. Yeah, it almost was a shame we did it in the consent agenda because this is a major milestone for the bridge project. The borough, I believe, originally had to obtain 11 rights of way from 11 different properties for the bridge, and we've now successfully done that. So that's a major part of the bridge project that's completed. I want to emphasize to council and the public that the bridge project is my absolute #1 priority to get done. For those who haven't seen my weekly update in the borough email newsletter, I encourage people to subscribe to that, or you're welcome to reach out to me for more information on it. I'm meeting every 2 weeks with our engineer and with PennDOT to make sure everyone's staying on track. And it's really important to me that we get this done, and I'm going to do my best to hold, the parts the borough can control to make sure we're getting done as quickly as possible for the public.
Thank you so much. All right, new business. I have two notes here. One is that the fire company met for their meeting to have an election for their chief, and Fran Dixon was elected to his 6th term as chief engineer. So congratulations to Mr. Dixon for that, and he will be the fire chief through 2024.
Oh, it's silenced, I swear, folks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
The other item of business is that I received a resignation from Maureen O'Leary from the Parks and Recreation Board, and so that does create an open position. And if you're a member of the public and would like to participate, the council will through the office, publish that opening. Yes.
Absolutely, and just for everyone's benefit here, I'm not sure how the borough has handled this in the past, but just my understanding, if I'm wrong, feel free to just, kick me under the table here, John. is that council, since we do have a written resignation letter, for any resignation from a borough committee, council does technically have to vote and approve the resignation. So that will be on the consent agenda for your December 15th meeting. But we'll, of course, we'll get applications out there and get that process going immediately.
So I'd like to thank Maureen for her many years of service to this community. Hopefully it will not be the last area where she volunteers. So thank you for that. Old business, 11A. We're going to talk about the bridge yard. Ms. Bryan, could you just set the task ahead of us?
Sure. So at our last work session meeting, council saw presentations from the artists that have been selected to provide art for the bridge. There was some discussion from council afterwards, and it was generally advised that we wanted to continue that conversation here tonight. I'm very grateful to the chair of our planning commission, Mr. Todd Bressie, who's with us here tonight, as well as to Michelle Carroll, who is on Zoom, who had a meeting with the borough, with the member of the borough's engineering team responsible for the bridge project, to talk through some of the questions that came up as part of the bridge art presentations. And Mr. Bressie actually had another conversation today with the responsible borough engineer to get more information. So if it's okay with you, Mr. President, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Bressie.
That would be great. Mr. Bressie. The floor is yours.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Is it better for me to speak or for you to ask questions, Mr. President?
Well, we saw the 4 proposals. I think, artistically, we had a lot of thoughts, and financially, I think we're having a lot of thoughts. So I'll just set the table there and would love to hear your feedback.
Okay. Well, I watched the presentations too. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. I'll try to remember to speak loudly. Outdoor voice. First of all, I want to acknowledge the borough manager and Michelle, who are really on this project day to day. Michelle happened to be in a training today, so I kind of pitched in and made a few calls and typed up some notes. And also Jennifer Riegel from Pinoni, who's our engineer working on this. So I was asked a question recently about the timing and kind of critical path that we would want to look at to move forward. And that's what I talked to the engineer about. We have 2 important milestones to head for, to aim towards. One is, right now in March, the borough is planning to make a resubmission of what are called 90% drawings to PennDOT and AMTRAC. And Samantha, please correct me if I'm wrong about any of this. And that's a really important threshold. The second milestone is, and that's an approximate date. Actually, the engineers said it could go earlier, it could go later.
And I'm doing everything in my power for that date to be earlier.
Yeah. And then the second important milestone is currently scheduled for September when the borough would advertise the project.
And again, could be earlier, could be later. I want to emphasize to the council and the public, we're doing everything in our power for it to be earlier.
So those are 2 near-term milestones. We're still years away from going across the bridge again, but those are 2 near-term milestones. In order for the bridge art project to proceed, and now the bridge art project has to proceed in tandem with the construction process. So in order for that to happen, there are 2 important things that have to be determined by the 90% design by March, more or less. And those are what are the materials that are going to be used. When you saw the presentations, you saw people talking about cast stone, about glass fiber reinforced concrete, about metalwork. We had originally requested only cast stone, but artists being artists, come up with other ideas. We will also need to know the size of the panels. This is what I'm told. Those are the things that actually have to be nailed down for the drawings. There's a lot of other things, but...
If I may emphasize one point on that, and I'm sorry if you're about to say this. The plans that we currently have call for it to be cast stone. That's why the artists were asked to provide in cast stone. So if we do go with a different material, then that will have to be cleared with PennDOT and Amtrak and, the design rework to incorporate that.
Right.
So it's going to be cast stone, is that what you're?
Well, I
I
mean,
just wanted to jump in.
Mr. Bessie spoke to the engineer, not me, so.
A reason for considering these other options is not simply because some creative person suggested it, but actually glass fiber reinforced concrete could cut the cost of the project. So we had actually explored this option several years ago and were told by PennDOT it would not be acceptable. But time goes on, and so based on the presentations that occurred 2 weeks ago, the borough staff has asked Pinoni to contact PennDOT and ask whether any of those other materials would be acceptable, which would mean they would have specifications already for the construction. And that conversation has already begun, I was told. It's not finished yet, but that's been raised with PennDOT. So, like the borough manager said, if we chose something other than cast stone, we would have to make sure it met those specifications, and we'd also have to provide a little bit more detail about the construction of it. So, what that means is the critical path to sort all that out is we have to get feedback as fast as we can from PennDOT about what materials we can use, or just determine we're going to use cast stone and accept whatever the consequences of that are cost-wise. Make sure the artists are still interested. They may have had their heart set on working in glass fiber reinforced concrete and don't want to work with us if we don't want to do that. So we have to make sure they're still interested. Pick an artist, contract with the artist, and then getting far enough in the concept design so that the artist knows what the size of the panel will be. There's a preset estimate of what those should be, but it could be better. So that's what we have to do by March. So how do we get there?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
At what point do we find out what this will ultimately cost? Doesn't sound like you got to that part yet.
No, and that's very challenging. What we have asked, there's a couple components to the cost. There's the cost of putting cast stone up there, if we use cast stone, or other materials, if we use other materials. So let's just say cast stone. We've asked, I've asked Michelle and Pinoni to break out what is the kind of base cost of just doing plain cast stone there. So at least we'll know what that is, because the cost of making it an art panel, a specialty panel, as opposed to a regular panel, will just be a small incremental cost in terms of the cast stone. The bigger cost will be in the production of it, which requires making a mold and then using that mold to make the panels. And we will only know that once we know who the artist is. We have to ask the artist what their cost would be for producing those molds, producing those panels. We could try to get some estimates from fabricators about what a specialty panel would cost versus a regular panel. I think the big issue will be what the cost is, what the artist's cost will be to create the mold that fabricates the panel. And the only way for us to find that out is to ask the artist. And we can ask them that once we know whether we're going to use cast stone or metal or glass fiber reinforced concrete. So that's how we get there. It's a little more reasonable.
Is this typical in a large construction project that you don't find out the cost of the art until you sort of completely committed to having that art? Because it seems like a very difficult decision for council to make, to spend money on a nice to have without being able to even get a grasp on scale of what that might be.
It is not typical. When we began this project 5 years ago, we actually did a lot of research with fabricators and found a fabricator in New Jersey. And we based a lot of our cost estimates on how the fabricator explained they would do the work. Since then, that fabricator has been bought and rebought, and they don't do this kind of work anymore. So they're not on the table. 2 years ago, This comes up about every 2 years. We tried again to get cost estimates, but we couldn't really find a lot of fabricators who were interested in giving us quotes at that time. So while it would be desirable to have the production process and the fabricators and a sense of the cost, we don't have that because we're in a kind of really volatile construction environment right now. And the work we did is not, in the past, is not really relevant anymore. It's also, Mr. President, a little complicated because this kind of work does not normally occur within a procurement process like PennDOT has. Normally, it's a procurement process where you have a lot more flexibility, like a city is running it itself as opposed to a state transportation department. And so part of the problem we have is trying to figure out how all this will cost, how much this would cost, not really knowing how the procurement would occur through PennDOT. That makes it a lot more complicated.
Sure does. Okay, I'm going to go Rickards, Bush, Deutsch.
I just kind of want to revisit some of the concerns I had before we even discussed the art, and that is my unease of 7 of us picking an artist. You know, I think that needs to be a really collaborative process. And the second is just the unknown of the cost. You know, even hearing a range of 80 to 150, which has been kind of thrown around, you know, I really do think that we'd have to do an analysis of where else those funds could be made. Now, I would ask, is it too late to consider just kind of a basic bridge design that the architect or the engineer can provide for us?
When you say basic bridge design, what do you mean exactly?
Well, a bridge without art.
Well, I think that's what we're talking about, which is
A bridge without art.
no, an option for the
Yeah.
panels is for them to be plain. That's correct, a plain panel. That is an
Well,
option.
Yeah, but
Well, I mean, it looks to me like the design of that bridge has sort of a recessed area which is ready to accept panels. That looks, I mean, the design that what's showing up in the screen, I sort of assumed that was ready to accept panels that would be. So, I mean, you obviously would say, well, we'll forego the art and just leave it like that. So it looks like, why didn't they?
No, I don't think that's an option. You're
Right,
going to have
so-
to put something
You're
on
going to put a
that.
cast stone panel there no matter what.
Oh, you have to put a cast stone panel. Could you,
Or
for example,
brick or
just,
something like
like,
that.
structurally, could you just brick it? Just continue with the brick veneer, is that?
That's a decision up to your design team. But you'd have something, brick, cast stone.
Sure, so it's not structural, it's still.
No, it's ornamental.
It's ornamental, okay. So whatever you put there would be something like that. Okay, got it.
Okay, hold on, Mr. Bush.
Yeah, so the proposal that we looked at last month had cost breakdowns by artist. Now, were those old cost what did those represent? Because I thought
I
they
didn't
were.
see them.
Okay.
I didn't see that either.
They were like dollar amounts.
I
in
saw
that.
artists putting in what I assumed was they had things like, basically their design costs, transportation, like if they
It
were
was an
transporting. I think it was not production costs.
Okay, so that was just an estimate for the artist's fees and not the production
That's my
costs.
sense. But they were hard to compare because they seem not,
Yeah,
they're
I
apples
mean,
to oranges.
they were-
So you didn't see it.
Yeah.
Samantha, do you have more information there?
Yeah, that's my understanding is that was not that's the cost just paid the artist, not for the materials and all that, but I'll double check that.
Okay.
I was just going to say, these bridges are being repaired all over Pennsylvania, have been, these orphan bridges have been repaired. Are we the first town to put designs up? I mean, I imagine there's other towns that have gone through this. Why are we reinventing the wheel in terms of a design panel?
So I'd like to, thank you.
Well, Todd, do you have anything to add or any information for Andrew's question?
It's not typical. I mean, first of all, art aside, this is a very unconventional bridge project in terms of this design. Just go look at any of the bridges Lower Merion's built in the past couple of years. They're just like plain concrete bridges.
Yeah.
They're nice in Lower Merion, but they're not nearly, I mean, we have a custom architecturally designed bridge. Again, the art, we already have that, right? And so,
And that was based on decisions that council made in 2004, 2005.
yes. And the idea always was that there would be ornamental cast stone on it, whether the architect designs it or an artist designs it. So there's lots of cast stone ornamentation on, caps on columns and trim and things like that. That's just part of the bridge design.
Okay. I I understand there's hundreds of bridges being repaired, you know,
That's true,
in the
right.
process. And I just didn't understand that we were in a different position.
So that's wanted to share dovetails perfectly with what you just said, Todd. It's like, because I was one of the council members who attended, like say the last ad hoc bridge committee meeting, when we had an ad hoc bridge committee, which was 2 borough administrations ago. And Heidi Boyce was the chair of that committee while she was on council. And Heidi and the council members even prior to Aaron and I had selected Venturi Scott Brown because they're like a really world-renowned Philadelphia architectural firm. They're like, you know, they were the ones who designed the Philadelphia Orchestra Hall that was never built, but they've done a lot of buildings around the world that are really well-known, like sort of by architects. They're sort of architects kind of, and so it's like a sort of a special thing. During the latter phases of that ad hoc bridge committee, though, the discussion came up. There were some members of council, even prior to me and Aaron, who wanted to have art on the bridge as like part of the bridge. So in the later phases of that ad hoc committee, when the bridge design was being complete, we thought, well, let's provide an opportunity for art that doesn't require that the art be there, that the architect should have an option to finish the bridge, like to sort of design the panels and finish the bridge. And that was in light of the fact that Venturi Scott Brown has this kind of, it's part of what they do, which is this aesthetic of like carving in stone. But they know a lot about doing architectural lettering in stone. And like architectural, like buildings have that kind of thing. And they actually do a lot of that kind of lettering on their buildings. Like, for example, 1600 block of Locust has the Curtis Institute dormitory building and rehearsal hall, and it's a Venturi Scott Brown building and has really big architectural lettering in cast stone.
Yeah,
and that was so that was like sort of that's some of the history of why this has this like sort of sandstone cast stones. Like, so the idea was, well, the architects could do something architectural there, if not have art. And I thought the idea at that time also was so that the bridge construction, the finishing of the bridge wouldn't be held up by either the cost of public art or the intricacies of making decisions about finding public art or procuring art. So I just wanted to add that because I think there was always this intent, I assumed there was an intention that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, that the architects would also design a solution for the finished bridge. And I wonder if they actually have it somewhere.
And you have us.
And I think they could be asked.
No, it was the yeah.
So that's something we can definitely find out. But I guess I would just say, as I mentioned at last meeting, it would really just like break my heart and the bridge art held up the bridge project. And given that, based on the conversations that Ms. Carroll and Mr. Bresci had with the responsible borough engineer, I'll admit I am somewhat fearful that, especially if we can move things forward a little bit faster than that March deadline, that this bridge art could very easily result in a delay on the bridge project, which I think would not be good. I also am concerned about the cost now that I'm starting to get a better sense of the cost figure. So obviously, this is a policy decision more than so this is above my pay grade, but I'll just throw out there for council that I think if your goal is to move forward as quickly as possible on the bridge and to reduce the cost, that you might want to consider alternatives other than moving forward with the art. But again, that being said, if you do want to do art, me and Mr. Bresci and Ms. Carroll will work with the engineer and the artist and do whatever we need to do. But I just can't promise that we're going to make that March deadline.
But would it be possible, and I don't know that there's a consensus on council for this, but to say, move forward with the art, and the moment that externalities mean that it would delay the bridge, the project is done.
I would want to know that the architects have a backup plan. And like, that might just be like one of the things Ventura Scott Brown does in a lot of their building is patterns. They do the really good architectural patterning, and sometimes they press those patterning into the stone. And or sometimes they do them, they're applied or they're super, they're painted or whatever, but that it's something they know how to do. So I wonder if they might actually have something they just never showed us because they weren't asked to, I think it's really worth a conversation. I mean, maybe for Todd to have that conversation with them perhaps, because.
Let me just get a sense on council here. Council members who have no appetite for moving forward with art.
Oh, are you doing a straw poll here?
Yeah, straw poll.
Can I ask a question before you?
Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
How is this paid for?
Cash money from the borough.
Okay, this doesn't have anything to do
No,
with grant money.
no one else is paying for the
Okay,
art.
just wanted to make it clear.
There's no cost sharing on the art.
And also,
Everything else is cost shared.
That's
on
what
the
I
art.
thought.
The artists were compensated, weren't they, for the
Yes.
proposals?
Yes.
For their time?
We've sunk, some money into this to date, but not a,
Small.
a very
Small.
They've been paid for their time.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I would favor moving ahead with architectural lettering.
Okay.
We're voting on who wants
We're
to
not
move it.
voting,
No,
I'm just
okay.
asking opinions. Who is, just the simplest, cheapest thing, and let's stop talking about, artists' proposals.
Yeah, I mean, when this came up,
Well, seeing a majority,
that was my
I
feeling
think we
before
can
started.
wrap up this conversation. I see 4 people, unless someone would like to try and sway some of their council members.
All right, I feel like we're not going to have an opportunity like this again. This is a major structure, and I really enjoyed some of the artist presentations. I agree with your thinking that we move forward as long as it looks like it's not going to delay the bridge. That we try to make this fit into the time frame. I would love the opportunity to have
The parties involved would have incentive to move things quickly because they would know that if they miss the deadline, they don't get the order. But we would need support from council to actually spend that money if it did actually get its deadlines.
Can I want to express maybe a little slightly different point of view. I wouldn't be comfortable jettisoning or not doing the art unless we were certain that we had a good architectural solution, and that the architects of the bridge were the ones providing that solution, not the engineers. I think it has to be, because it's a work of architecture.
So would you like to wait 2 weeks to get
And
that
that should be
answer?
completed. Well, and maybe it doesn't take 2 weeks.
Well, we're not going to meet again
Yeah,
until December 1st.
Oh.
I can definitely talk to the architect between now and December 1st, yeah.
So I just want to say, I'm perfectly happy to see I think it's a great idea to check in with the architect and see they may have already done this, or maybe a relatively simple thing, but I just want to say, putting it out there, I may be the only person whose tastes are simple enough, and that's fine. It seems like a bad idea, but Carol Marie, you're still on this meeting, and multiple times come to meetings and said, why don't you just get a nice logo with an elm tree and Narberth and the date of our founding, and everybody knows it, and it's simple and it's classic and it's timeless. Why don't you just have that cast, put it in the middle, call it a day? The brick veneer is nice, it matches, it complements the buildings around it. There would be a simplicity to that and an ease, and I just want to say, if the architectural solution either wasn't available to us or it looked like it was going to also take time and a considerable amount of money, that solution would personally please me, and I actually think it would not displease anybody in the community who lost opportunities to, fund public art, a bigger public art project notwithstanding. So I think we should keep our options open.
And to piggyback on that, Michelle, we can call it the Carol Marie scale of design. We can also, no, in all seriousness, I do really like that plan. I also think, we now have Jeff as a public works manager who's done amazing work with our planners. Are there ways that in that structure with hanging planters, with flags or whatnot, that we could really customize and make the bridge beautiful aside from the structure while saving money and not offending someone with 7 of us choosing art for the next 150 years.
Well, and we have other venues for public art, such as the library, this building.
Sure. Great point.
Yeah.
Great point.
Okay, so next steps are contact the architect, see what they can do. I think there's two questions. One is whether they have plans pattern. The other is, you know, sort of a simple borough name and seal.
Is it still McCovery? Is that the project architect?
I've only spoken with them once, so I don't remember the firm's name off the top of my head.
And it does not sound like there is an appetite to move forward with any of these artist submissions. So that's where we are. Okay, let's talk about infill development and ADUs. Mr. President, you made a presentation at the last meeting, and I know that council members had thoughts and questions. I know there was some, I received some questions, so any council members, if you would have questions for Mr. Brassi, or opinions or thoughts you'd like to share generally with council about the direction you'd like to take this proposal, now would be a good time. Go ahead, Cindy.
Nancy negative tonight. Really. It's not negative. I'll really know.
At least you're not a Debbie Downer.
I'm very interested in us focusing on the ADUs for two reasons. First, we know that they are in existence throughout the borough, so we should either formalize that or enforce that. So I'm interested in really looking at the ADUs. As far as the infill development, you know, I personally do not have an interest as a council person to increase density at this time. We have substantial change coming with apartments. We have a new historical preservation. I do not see an urgency at this time to concentrate on infill development. So my current appetite, if you're asking for opinions, is to hold off on infill development. Wait to see the development of the apartments, historical preservation, and reconsider that at a later date. But really then look at the policy of those ADUs.
Okay, other council members, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you on the ADUs. I think that I'm excited to see you move forward on that. That's been something that people in the community have asked us about, accessory dwelling units. I think I mentioned this to Todd earlier, and I'll just throw it out here at the table so maybe other people can comment on it as well. There was one recommendation about whether or not we would wish them to be either the main house or the accessory dwelling unit to be owner occupied as a requirement, and I think that's a question I'd like to see if the Planning Commission can just have more conversation about that, explore whether that's even legal and how that would be enforced. And because I think there are some things to be said in favor of that, and I think that I just would like to ask to explore that along with the other options. And then I agree, Cindy, that I'm not interested necessarily in exploring ways to increase density now, but I also think with respect to the infill development, I mean, we could call it broadly that, but there are multiple components. It may be that exploring the new building forms, like the views or the cottages, which would provide more opportunity for sort of perhaps a little more intense use of a lot. Maybe that's something where I could sort of see holding off on that because that does increase density. But the planned development provisions were really more intended to sort of offset the problems that the historic preservation ordinance causes for certain folks in the historic district who have large lots and now have been sort of deprived of an opportunity to do something they may have done before, just with the existing building forms, not building forms that would be, that would increase density, but it just gives, and it's just it's not a large number of lots, but I think it gives them back the flexibility, some flexibility, given that they may have lost some opportunities. So I would support continuing to look at the planned development provisions. I think that they make a lot of sense.
Okay. Other council members, Rob?
Yeah, I support this. I thank the commission for developing these creative solutions. More affordable housing options come in the form of ADUs and smaller cottages, and that could allow for multiple generations. We've talked about this so many times, over many years. It could allow for grandparents to live in close proximity to grandkids. There are lots of benefits to the community of making available smaller living units. So I would support that. My one My one concern is about losing open space and losing the environmental benefits of mature trees and open side yards that can absorb stormwater. And so I talked with Todd about, I would like to be able to explore, in conjunction with my support for this, I would like to explore possible amendments to other ordinances, such as shade tree ordinances, the stormwater ordinance, to kind of limit the environmental impact of more intensive uses.
Brett?
Yeah, I'm in favor of this legislation. I mean, the ADUs, as people have said, are kind of essential to aging in place and to generating affordable housing options. It's in our comprehensive plan. They're already extending the borough. I think it's a great idea to formalize and legalize this form of housing. I think that the other proposals come out of a lot of the specific sort of zoning and subdivision problems that we've, not problems, but how homeowners have had to sort of torture their property by cutting off a section of it in order to allow them to subdivide. So I think this allows a flexibility that would have prevented some of the kind of less aesthetically pleasing and less, the things that homeowners have had to do to satisfy our current housing requirements. It doesn't really allow them to build more, it just allows them to build in a wiser fashion and not destroy their existing building to just to subdivide. So I feel like these are helpful options for the borough, and I'd like to see them further developed so we can discuss them.
Barbara?
I am in agreement with a lot of the things that were said here. I mean, I think the accessory dwelling units, we need to, both for the existing ones and for new ones, have regulations in place and guidelines for people. The one thing that, and I do think we need to think about this, should one or the other of the units there be owner occupied? Just to, I think it's something to explore. And in having a conversation with Todd, he mentioned that there's not a limit on the number of ADUs that you can have on a property right now, so that's probably something that needs to be added. I don't think you noticed that. And I agree with what Michelle was pointing out about the properties that are kind of forced into doing, as they express, something odd because of the way that I think we need to address that. Whether at this point that goes to include things like the mews and cottages, that's, I think, not as important as making sure that we have some options for folks who maybe have been limited because of the historic preservation ordinance. But I would like us also to consider whether we include narrower twins in this, though, because I think that's a great idea to have that as another way to have more affordable housing. If we would allow twins to be narrower, that might incentivize a more affordable housing stock. So we might want to include that, even if we're not ready to go to mews and cottages yet.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I just want to, I think we all realize this is like sort of an unusual moment in the history of council, because the Planning Commission's brought to us a kind of a proposal that's really rooted in our comprehensive plan that we actually had really never, and I think this is a first in a way, rather than sort of like addressing a particular like sort of problem or like sort of a defect of the code or something like that. It was really like they're looking to see, well, how do we create more affordability? How do we improve the transit-oriented nature of the community? How do we work on improve the social infrastructure, providing the kind of like looking at the environment, and trying to like sort of improve on the kind of quality of life we have here. And that's, I think it's like kind of a new, to me, it's a new day, and I really appreciate their effort to point that out and like and provide opportunities also to help the residents who've been maybe like weren't that pleased about the historic preservation ordinance, to give them additional opportunities to do things with their properties that maybe they felt were sort of taken away by that desire for the community to protect the pre-war housing stock. So that's sort of, to me, that's great. The idea, like as I read through the sort of half dozen or so ideas, I immediately thought, well, there's 2 here I don't like, and there's 4 here that I really like. And then I realized as I read through more carefully that I would like to see all of it go sort of to the next iteration of like sort of detail as ordinance language, because then we could really discuss sort of more in a fine-tuned way kind of what works and doesn't work. And an example of that is like with ADUs, I really kind of, like it's just my judgment that like 600 square feet is like kind of too big. Like it's sort of not the tiny house thing. But I can't, like just me saying that now is sort of meaningless, but I think it becomes more meaningful as we have ordinance language around all these things. So sort of then we can discuss some of the sort of nittier issues, the nattier issues. But and also like it's also like that in this proposal it doesn't say anywhere like that it's just 1 ADU per lot, but I think we sort of all assume that, and that's like when we really get into the ordinance language, we'll sort of realize what questions we don't have right now. And so, and maybe certain things that like I reject now will make more sense to me when I see what it really looks like when it's, you know, like kind of in the ordinance language. So that I'd like kind of like us to see what's next, you know, like to move it on. Move it along.
Is there support for that idea of asking the planning commission to continue bringing in the resolution on this?
Can I add and ask that too? And Michelle, you had said that, you know, cottages, for example, would really only apply to a couple public properties. Could we get a scope of that? Of, you know, we're talking about historical properties where, you know, and I know that this is difficult, we won't hold you to, are we talking about 5 properties or 50 properties?
I think, Todd, didn't you say?
It says 20.
20 to 30? Okay.
This is our numbers, man.
Estimate.
For cottages.
An informal estimate suggests there are 20 lots in this category.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, 20 sounds.
Okay. Okay, sorry I missed that.
Okay, actually, I concur with the first point that Cindy made, which is we have made a lot of changes recently, and I think it may be helpful to give it a little time to see how that plays out against the, you know, some of them were made to recognize new economics in the borough. Some of them are restrictions, some of them are, you know, new opportunities, and I don't think you're hearing any opposition from council, but unlike many times we come to you, maybe not a rush to, you know, how can we get this ordinance passed 3 months from now, but maybe this is a longer discussion over the next, you know, year to 18 months to see where it goes.
I mean, although there is some potential reason to.
Well, there could also be a split in what council chooses to adopt, right? It doesn't have to do it all at once.
Well, I think we'll know, if we could get this in ordinance language, then we'll know what we want to push faster, what we can do slower. That's, I think, what we don't really know until we kind of
How long do you think it would take the planning commission to bring this to ordinance language?
Well, now that we don't have to work on the bridge.
It was a royal lead.
I believe that, you know, I respect the borough managers' trafficking of workload here, but in the last conversation we had, we thought we could aim to January. But I will defer to the borough manager because she is trying hard to put into place systems that rationally elevate the priorities of the resources.
Michelle, and then Cindy.
I have a question for you, Todd. My impression, correct me if I'm wrong, is that at a minimum, the plan development provisions may have a certain urgency insofar as passing them sooner than later has the capacity to incentivize some better projects and perhaps prevent some of these lots. It could potentially prevent some the losses in resources or some difficult hardship, cases being brought to us that if we were to be able to provide this flexibility sooner than later, we may be able to avoid some negative consequences.
Is that a question?
It's a question. That was my impression, that we might have some degree of urgency to sort of pass the plan development or take a closer look and move forward on that more quickly because they have the potential to prevent negative consequences from historic preservation.
That's true. I also think the row house provision, just allowing slightly narrower row houses could be important in that regard.
The boroughs.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be the second most important thing, I'd say.
I would favor
But
moving
it's,
forward more aggressively with things if in your judgment they have the potential to prevent problems. Right now we already know we have some illegal ADUs, but we'd all like to work that out and have that regularized and
I think we can
enforced.
certainly look at how many properties. So the way the proposal is written now is it would only apply in the historic district, in the 3A, 3B, 3 zone, to houses that are big enough to have infill. That's like a lot of, we could definitely come back to you with a number for that. It probably is hopefully in the range of about 20. My thought was that is a good place to start, to see how it's applied, if it's applied, and if once we see how a couple of cases work, then a later borough council could decide whether it could be applicable more broadly throughout the borough. So we too were mindful of that kind of incrementalism that you all were speaking about. And this seemed to be a good way to test some ideas in a very limited basis that would target relief to certain property owners and provide us the ability to see whether it could work for more broad applications later.
Okay. Are you leaving with what you needed to leave with?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so. And I'll confer with the borough manager again and what her kind of anticipated workflow is.
All right, thank you. Is there a chance that we will come back from executive session to make any decisions this evening?
I deferred to the borough solicitor, but actually I do not have any items council would need to vote on.
I don't have any items for it.
Then I'll take a motion to adjourn. Anyone?
I move that we adjourn.
Barbara, second. All in favor? Aye. We'll take 5 minutes and then we will need an executive session to discuss personnel and land acquisition matters.
Hold on, everyone.